Good evening and welcome to another episode of The Addict's Advocate. I'm your host, Dusty Dean, and it is my pleasure to introduce Brian Teigen to the show. How are you, sir?
What's up, man? Glad to be here. Thank you for having me, Dusty.
Hey, thank you very much for spending the evening with me talking all things addiction and recovery related. We recognize that part of recovery is staying in recovery, and that's
Absolutely.
living it. And so nonetheless, there's a lot of good things going on in your life, and I definitely don't want to waste any of that time talking about me or anything else. So, without further ado, I know that you were in recovery, and the first thing I always love to hear from my guests is, what happened? How did you recognize it? What were the trials and tribulations how did it evolve?
Yeah, great to be here. Brian Teigen, recovering heroin addict. I'm here in Fresno, California. How it started was obviously opiates. I was a functioning addict my whole entire life. Loved, why fly a kite when you can pop a pill? Drugs were like this big thing when, in the 90s, I remember when Oxycontin went from Norcos to Oxycontin, a lot of snorting of Oxycontin. Before you know it, drugs had just completely taken over my life. I remember going through college high on drugs and knowing that, like, if I had a presentation or if there are things that were needed to do, it's just, whether it was a presentation in school or whether it was a wedding and I needed to speak at that wedding, I just always needed to have, I needed to be high. And then it just took, obviously it just takes over. It took over my life. One thing led to another. I got married and I was big on Oxy, and before you know it, I fell into heroin. Did I drink? Absolutely, but I always wanted the drugs. If I had my choice, it would always be drugs. I loved pills, and when I found heroin, that was it. That was I found closure. I found exactly what I was looking for. I found that never ending warm bath. It was bliss, and it was a way for me to brush everything under the table. I wasn't present for anything, and you start doing more heroin, and now your body becomes dependent upon it. And it just, my wife and I, we had a business, and it just, I flourished. I did really well. I was, taking care of the family. We were making good money. But just, nobody had an idea that I was a heroin addict. I have 2 daughters, and wow, it's crazy how heroin just takes, you wake up in the morning, you don't know what flannel pocket you put it in. You just, you are powerless to it. It's complete chaos. My life was complete chaos. I was constantly lying, constantly manipulating, gaslighting. I was a bad person. And came to the point where my wife got cancer. She got cancer. We found out she got cancer. And at this point, I think I'd been doing heroin for maybe a couple of years. And when she got cancer, it was, man, so that's when the suicide came in. How could I couldn't even live with myself. Here I am trying to take care of my family, take care of my wife when she gets out of chemo, put food on the table for my kids. And I was all the lying. But then again, I didn't know how to tell my wife, hey, I know you have cancer and everything, but I need help. I know that, you're going through chemo, but I need to go check into a recovery center. And at the same time, I didn't even know how recovery worked. I didn't even know anything. I didn't know anything about recovery. And that's when, like, suicide became like the only option out. My wife at that point had, I think maybe she was in week 5 of her chemo. And I remember that was it. I was going to take a hot bath, and I was going to, that was going to be the end. And I remember looking up at a picture in my closet, and I saw my kids, and I was like, how do I let my kids walk into this bathroom and find me dead? So I stuck it out, and I was still burying myself in shame and guilt, man. Those moments, I remember those moments so clearly. It's just such a bad place. And it got to the point where I remember calling a friend of mine, and him and I worked together out in Kalinga back in the day. And he was somebody I could always talk to. And I ended up calling him. I hadn't spoken to him in 8 years. And I called him up and I said, hey, you got a minute to talk? It was 8:00 at night. I was walking my dog around the block, and I was in such a bad place. I called him. He answered the phone, And long story short, he ended up coming in town. He was the first responder in Merced. He came in town, and we met at a bar, and we were watching a football game. It was playoffs during 2021 going into 2022, and we watched. We came up with this brilliant plan that I was going to go to Bakersfield, California, get a hotel room, tell my wife that I was in a golf tournament, and I was going to detox in a hotel room. And that was the game plan. So my wife had just finished chemo. I had gaslighted her and manipulated her, letting her know, like, hey, I'm going to go to this golf tournament with my buddy. We signed up for it. And she had just finished chemo. And then I took care of her that last week that she needed help. And she was all about it. She's like, go, you've been great. Go. My mom will take care of me while you're gone. And she was so sick. I mean, she was just so sick. It was the real deal. And she's cancer free now, but she definitely she was so sick. And at the same time, so was I. I told her I was going to a Bakersfield, golf tournament, and I remember packing up. It was, I bought enough dope to kill a horse, and I had 8 milligrams of Suboxone, and I was going to cut up those 8 milligrams and cut them into slices into twos. And I was going to take, 2 milligrams a day. The game plan was to not get addicted to, not get hooked on Suboxone or not get hooked on methadone. And but at the same time, that's all I could buy. But the guy only had one strip of Suboxone, so that's how it worked out. And like I said, I took a morphine pill and I took a marijuana pill. And the marijuana pill and morphine pill were going to last me 32 to 36 hours, so I didn't get precipitated withdrawals before I took the Suboxone. And that was our game plan. So I drove up to Bakersfield. It was Sunday night. I got loaded. And, the next morning I was going to wake up and I was going to go 32 hours without anything. And that was the game plan. And I remember waking up the next morning in Bakersfield in this stinky hotel room and Merle Haggard Boulevard, and I remember just waking up and I opened the bag. I took the morphine pill and I took the marijuana pill or the gummy bear immediately. Like I was supposed to wait as long as I could before I took the marijuana pill, then, take the morphine pill like by 5 or 6 p.m. As an addict, what do? I took it immediately. And I think I did because I knew in the back of my head I had enough dope in there. And I knew it wasn't going to work. I was like, this plan isn't going to, this is like a vacation. But at the same time, I wasn't going to come back home. Like this was going to be the last vacation. And I hated myself, completely hated myself. I woke up, I took the morphine pill and the marijuana, the gummy bear, and I rolled back over and I went back to sleep and I woke up around 11 o'clock and my buddy was gone. He was gone. But guess what else he took? He took the backpack, and the backpack was gone. He was gone. And I'm like, oh, he'll come back, no big deal. 12 o'clock rolls around and I'm, my brain is kind of stretched out. I was starting to get a little anxiety. 1 o'clock rolled around. Now I'm really getting anxiety. 2 o'clock rolls around and I'm like, shit, where is this dude? I'm calling him up. He's not answering his phone. I'm tripping. I'm fully tripping. He wasn't answering the phone. And then 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock rolls around. And now it's coming. It's coming. I know it's coming. I know I know the runny nose, the cold sweat, diarrhea. And I was tripping. And 5 o'clock rolled around. And now I'm in panic mode. I'm in fetal position on the couch, and I am just like, I know what's going to happen. 6 o'clock rolls around, and that was it. I'm gonna leave the hotel. And I remember it's in Bakersfield. It's just like Fresno. It's cold in January. It was January 31st, 2022. He's not answering his phone. I'm out. I'm wearing basketball shorts. I'm barefoot, and I'm wearing a t-shirt. And I walk outside. I don't even know where I'm going. I'm messed up. I walk out the hotel room, and I walk towards the stairwell. And then before you know it, I walk down the stair and I fall down the stairs. I fall down the stairs. I break my foot. So now I'm trying not to get arrested because I'm created, mayhem. They don't know who I am. I don't have any ID. Plus I'm a mess. I look like a bum. And I convince them that I have a room, and I end up getting back to my room. But the crazy thing is I had so much pain in my foot I had so much pain in my foot. I was watching my ankle and everything blow up like a 2-liter bottle. That took away the anxiety. And I was able to focus on that pain in my foot to kind of ease my mind. I mean, don't get me wrong. It was
Don't
still
recommend
hell.
breaking bones.
Yeah, I was still in hell. I was still going through it, but at least it helped a little bit. And I remember watching just my ankle, and I couldn't go anywhere. I was stuck there. I had no idea what to do. And before you know it, it's like 3:00 in the morning. And guess who showed up? The guy showed up with my backpack, and he gave me a little bit of Suboxone. The next couple of days are kind of vague. Like I remember waking up every now and then. I remember waking up the next day, and he had rolled. He had put my ankle was taped up and it was iced, and he had crutches there. He had Subway soup, chicken noodle soup every morning next to my bed. And he took care of me, and gave me some Suboxone. By about day 3, going into day 4, I was feeling a little bit better. I mean, not great, but I had a little bit of that Suboxone in me. And by day 4, I was feeling better. Day 5, now I'm going to have to come home. So as I'm coming home, he looks at me, and I'm better. I'm on crutches. I'm still a disaster, obviously. And he says to me, this is the last, obviously I took the last of the Suboxone. And I'm on my way back to Fresno, and he says to me, all right, man, you got to do me a favor now. What's that? And he goes, when you get back home to Fresno, you need to tell your wife the truth about everything. You tell your mom the truth about everything, and you're going to tell your buddy Brendan the truth about everything. My buddy Brendan tried telling my wife about a year and a half prior that I was doing pills, and him and I had a falling out, obviously, and we hadn't spoken since. And so I'm like, great idea, right? Great idea. I get my car, and I'm like, right? Like, dude, there's no way I'm going to tell my wife. There's no way I'm telling anybody. Like, if anything, I'm going to take a drug test and throw it in my buddy's face. I mean, that's how delusional I was. And show him, like he was wrong. And I'm driving home. I hit Delano, and I don't remember the drive home. I just remember getting off the freeway in Fresno. It was the same parking lot that my buddy and I had met and came up with this clever idea. And I was just bawling, and I was completely bawling. And I grabbed the phone. I called my buddy up, and I wasn't going to text him because then he'd have to text me back. I knew if I called him, he wasn't going to answer the phone. So I call him up, and he answers the phone, and he goes, "What's up, man?" I'm like, "Hey, I wasn't expecting you to answer, but anyway, you can meet me in my house in the next, 30, 45 minutes. And he's like, "I'll be there in 10. I'm like, great. So I call my mom. Same thing happens. I wasn't expecting her to answer the phone. She answers, and she says she's going to be there in an hour. And I get home, I see my wife. She is so sick. She looked at me. How is she couldn't even really talk. I remember her hands were underneath the sink, and she was just washing her hands. So sick and frail, and just, a mess. And we both were. And she was looking at me like knew something was wrong. And then all of a sudden the door knocked, and I knew it was on. My buddy showed up at the front door. He came in, and my wife was like, "What's going on?" He brought his wife. He brought backup, and we sat there. And I told everyone at the table, I said, "I need everyone to come sit at the table." My wife she had no idea what was going on. I could see the panic in her eyes, and everyone sat down. I said, I didn't go to Bakersfield to play in a golf tournament. I went there to detox off of drugs, and I broke my wife's heart, and she fell to the ground. It was the worst day of my life, but the greatest day of my life. It was the greatest day. Confession leads to healing. I totally believe that. And that's when my journey began. And, I didn't, when my buddy said, well, was it pills? And I was like, and it was heroin. That's what really, it crushed her. And, I left the house, and I gave her space. She ended up calling me back and having me come back. And that's, like I said, that's when the journey began. It was a couple of days later that word had gotten out to a couple of friends that I had done this, and somebody had called me and he said, hey, I'm going to do you a favor, man. If you're really serious about this sobriety, I'm going to text you 3 names, and it's up to you to call one of them. And he texted me this dude named Mike Z, this guy named Mike R, and this dude named Tony R. And I called Tony R because his name wasn't Mike. That's the only reason why I called him. But this guy, Tony, man, he saved my life, and he's one of my best friends to this day. I actually married him and his bride, did the wedding for them. And I mean, we're family now. But I remember what this guy did. what he did was he just handed me the keys to community. And he told me, he said, he's a big AA guy, but he told me to go to Heroin Anonymous. And I went to a Heroin Anonymous meeting. It was my first meeting ever. It was during the Super Bowl. The Rams were playing the Bengals. And I went to the meeting, and there was only 5 people there. And I was that guy with a hooded sweatshirt on, sitting in the back and sweating and hollow legs. And these guys, the 5 people that were there, a couple of them aren't there because they've overdosed, but there's 1 or 2 that was there, and we're still good friends to this day. And they loved on me. And before you know it, I remember like all the sober living vans were starting to show up, and I was like, who are all these people like showing up in these vans? And because I had no idea how any of it worked. And before you know it, all these sober living vans were showing up with all these people, and I was like, what's I had no idea, and I tell people all the time how lucky they are to be in sober living, to have roommates. And I showed up by myself, and I didn't have a roommate. I didn't have any of that. I just kept coming back. I kept coming back. And before you know it, I'm working the steps, and I'm seeing this word higher power on the wall. I'm seeing this word God in the big book. And before you know it, I'm starting to do my own work. And, I celebrate my sobriety date, January 31st, 2022 a lot, but the real date I celebrate is February 4th, 2022. This is the day I found God. It's the day I recognized everything. I was an atheist up until that point. I remember being in that hotel room in Bakersfield, like, my first prayer ever was, God help me, and God delivered. He helped me. He got me through it. One of the Beatitudes, blessed are the poor in spirit, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. The gift of suffering, right? The 4 noble truths of Buddhism. It's the gift of suffering is so amazing. It's so beautiful. It's such a beautiful gift.
Suffering's love.
What's that?
Suffering is love.
Suffering is love. Meaningful suffering, and at 21 Pathways, we translate scripture, and, we read the Beatitudes, but we kind of translate them. So we'll say, we translate that first beatitude as blessed are the underdogs, for they will have an unbelievable comeback story. And that's what all of us addicts and alcoholics are. We're a bunch of underdogs, and everyone's betting against us. Everyone thinks we're going to fail. A lot of people won't give us second chances, and we have to figure out a way to climb up that mountain, with one arm or no legs. And it's about community. And that's what that guy, he handed me the keys to community. And my first meeting was HA, and before you know it, I'm doing a coffee commitment. The coffee commitment saved my life. I have 2 friends that kind of disappeared, and it felt right to take the coffee commitment, and I took it. And before you know it, I was introducing myself to people. I was getting involved. And as I got involved, more things started to happen. Again, at 21, we call it these breadcrumbs of excitement that God just drops in front of us. And you just have to be willing and have the courage to pick them up. And once you do that, it's just, it's these miracles that just keep falling in your lap. And it's these breadcrumbs that you just keep picking up that opens up one door to another key to open up another door to another relationship, to a bridge to another relationship. And you just meet these amazing people, and you start to build a tribe and a group of people that you can trust, because they're vulnerable with you, and now you can be vulnerable with them. And as you're vulnerable together, you build this bond, this trust, to where you're willing to take their suggestions. And as you're willing to take their suggestions, you put it into action. And as you put it into action, you have this faith that ultimately now you have this faith in what they were saying, which is, step 2, how we came to believe, and that's all what step 2 is. We come to believe. And that was my journey. I came to believe in something greater than myself. And as I started to dig deeper and deeper into not only the big book, you come across phrases like faith without works is dead. And you come across, like, you see a higher power on the wall. Why do they call it a higher power? And you see the word God so many times in that book. And then on page 192, you see the word Lord for the first time. And now you're digging into, like, I remember Googling, I remember being that guy who couldn't do the Lord's Prayer, right? And I would just mumble trespasses every time, And so where did the Lord's Prayer come from? And, you find out it comes from the book of Matthew. And then you find out, faith without works is dead. It comes from the book of James. Then you realize, okay, well, who's this Oxford group? And who's this this James Club and who's this Calvary Church. And you find out kind of a little bit of these breadcrumbs of, these dots that they want you to connect from this big blue book. And as I started to do that, that's my journey. Like, just, when I came across the Lord's Prayer in the book of Matthew, the book of James, and then before you know it, I found myself, I really identified with the book of Exodus because, when Moses and his people were slaves to Pharaoh, they had to figure out a way to break away from those chains. And, that's what we do as addicts and alcoholics. We have to figure out a way to break away. We have to take that leap of faith. And then as we take that leap of faith, it's not going to be, unicorns and beautiful flowers and whatever you want to call it. But I mean, it's hard. Like, sober living's tough, man. Like, it's not easy. You got to face reality. You got to face those fears. You got to face those doubts. You're going to have that test of heart. And that's what it's been for me. It's been a constant test of heart. And it's been a constant, it's been a challenge. But, like in the book of James and from the book of Job, like it's not, it's not a punishment. It's not a challenge. It's not a trial, but rather it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to persevere. Every moment is an opportunity to let go. God sends us on a journey that we didn't think we needed, only to give us everything we ever wanted. And that's exactly what sobriety's done for me. I remember after 1 year of sobriety, I found myself in Israel, and I was getting baptized in Israel. And you start walking around these beautiful locations in Israel, and you start to really put together like the Sermon on the Mount and Masada and all these, Capernaum and Sea of Galilee, and you come across all these amazing places. It totally changed my whole life, my whole perspective on everything. It wasn't about my perception. It was about perspective as a whole. And I started to grow. The Beatitudes of, blessed are those who have a thirst and hunger for righteousness, for they will be filled. The following Beatitude is, blessed are the merciful, for they'll be shown mercy. I fully believe that to have a thirst and hunger for righteousness, it's shown through a life of mercy, right? It's shown through forgiveness. And, working those steps, like it or not, I was anti-AA. I was that guy who was going into AA like, dude, these dudes, they're teaching us to set aside prayer, and these dudes got ego like no other. And like, dude, these guys are nuts. But it's about, setting everything I think, aside for a new experience, whether that person has an ego or not. Am I judging them because they're judging me? And you start to learn more about yourself. You start to learn like, the character defects of the sins and pride and ego and self-centeredness. One of the other things I've learned in sobriety is, it tricks us, right? Pride, ego, sin, it just tricks us into thinking it knows what's best for us, when really it's just killing us. And that's exactly what heroin was doing to me. It was killing me. And, I'm able now to like recognize that I was powerless, the physical allergy. And, I see a lot of people on social media that hate on the 12 steps. And I get it, dude. I fully get it. I see a lot of people that hate on the Bible. I see a lot of people that they just hate. I mean, there's people who can hate on your podcast, man, and
I get it.
But you do. But the thing is, we all have something in common. We all want to be sober, and we just want to better our lives. I just want to better my life. I want to be a good example to my family and my friends. And, if people have a problem with the way I go about my sobriety, hey, oh, well, like, cool. I just hope you stay sober. I hope that, cool, whatever you got to do to stay sober, just know that if you ever need help, you can always count on me. And, that's the one thing about our community. That's one thing, and, before you know it, I'm doing all these speaking engagements, and one thing led to another. We found ourselves at this church, and I found myself giving up my business to work at a church as a janitor, a great business. And, I gave it all up to become a janitor at a church. And I still am. I work at the most beautiful church in Fresno, Bethany Church here in Fresno. And, our pastor is the best pastor in California. And he asked me, like, we had a long talk about recovery, and he asked if I wanted to start something. And we were like, why don't we try something new and something different? And we created 21 Pathways. And, actually there's a lot of meaning to the 21, but, we look at it, you have these spiritual principles, and you have these, people who, these spiritual steps, and it's combining them, people who need to find steps. And then there's people who need to find something, the spiritual principles. And It's ultimately just walking down that one path. We're a community and we do things together, but we really look at scripture as a solution, as the solution, as well as community. That's that's what we teach. We do a teaching series the last Tuesday of every month, going over every step. We're going into step 3 this next month, actually next week. But it's a lot of people from the AA rooms, a lot of people from the church rooms, and we just try to, like we said, show that meekness, show that there's no correct way. It's just whatever works best for you. There's, we were talking earlier, just there's a million ways up to the top. So it's something that we're really proud of. My wife and I and a couple others created it, and it was reason why we really kind of started was, one thing I learned in these rooms was the significant others, the wives, the husbands, they were getting left out. I've seen so many times, marriages or relationships getting screwed because one guy's getting sober and the other person's staying at home, and there's this resentment. And I experienced it. My wife was at that point where I remember going to a meeting on a Sunday night, and I'll never forget when she said, "Oh, you're going to a meeting, huh?" And I saw the tone in her voice, and I was like, "Yeah." And I was actually doing a speaking engagement. I spoke at a recovery summit, and she went with me. This was like a couple weeks later. And we go to this recovery summit together, and I'm walking around shaking. I know everybody. And I'm introduced, and I look back, and she's over in the corner by herself. And, I totally felt it. I totally understood it. And I understood why people were getting divorces or relationships were breaking, because, you think, oh, I'm getting sober. It's about me. But we forget about the other people. We forget about our significant others. I mean, my wife didn't know about Al-Anon, and if she went to Al-Anon, I promise you she would have put it back after that. But it's just, it's not like she was running around telling her friends her husband was a heroin addict. It's not like, it was easy for her. I remember she didn't have anyone to talk to. She was so embarrassed about it. And, when we started 21 Pathways, I'll never forget when I got baptized. I remember telling myself, I'm going to walk this walk correct. And my wife and I, God's going to be at the center of everything, and to this day, God's at the center of our relationship. That's one thing that we teach is, allow God in, and, it's his will. And if we have to figure out a way to push aside that ego and let God just take its course. And I'm big on prayer. I'm big on meditation. I'm big on, the steps from the book of AA. I'm big on the Bible, but more importantly, I'm big on just supporting everybody. I really am. I think, if as long as we all want the same goal, that should be the focus. That should be the focus. I feel like I've talked for like 4 hours straight just now.
Dude, I've got so many wonderful notes here. I've just been frantically scribbling because you've touched on so many different things, and I want to start checking some things off that I think that are very important. But number one, thank God the missus is cancer free.
Absolutely, thank you. Yeah, she's been cancer free, and 21 Pathways. We have a lot of people in there that survivors of cancer, or somebody that, in their family. I have one guy, he lost his father to cancer, and it's a place for them to come and just come and hang out and just meet other people and find, like we all have that. We're all somewhat of a slave to a secret somehow, some way. We all have that hurt habit hang up. We all have that something. So, alcoholics, Richard would always say, alcoholics and addicts, it just shines a little bit more. We just, it glows in us a little more. And, our suffering is a little bit more for people to see. And I see that, but everybody suffers from something, everybody does. If you say you don't, and you think you're perfect, good, awesome. But, we all there's something that all of us struggle with. And there's a hurt in all of us. There's a hurt. But hey, one thing we do is we don't waste it. We don't waste a hurt.
I think in the moments of recognizing our problem, right, there's that release, right? It's we've been self-preserving for so long that when we're able to finally go, okay, look at me, look at everyone, this is who I am. It's like that our cry has finally been heard,
Yeah.
because we recognize that all of our methods were shit. They never work,
Right.
they never work. And it's at that moment that you got to grab a hold of someone and hold on tight to them to make sure that at that moment, you get them the help that they need. Because those are dangerous
Absolutely.
moments. Those are dangerous moments.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when we're powerless, we don't know what the next step is. We
Right.
don't know what to do. And,
Yeah.
these people that say, oh, you don't need this, you don't need that. You might not, but I'm not as smart as you. I need I need
Yeah.
some directions on how to get from point A to point B.
Yeah.
And, I wish I had the intelligence of all these people that, that don't need any help, and, but I know I'm not the only one. And I know there's more people out there just like me. And, it's about learning that process. It's about learning how to use that map and learning which way is north and south and east and west and what stars to follow. And it's, you have to ask questions and you have to hear testimonies. And you got to listen to podcasts and you got to, we're so fortunate. We live in an information age where the information is instant.
Yeah.
It's this microwave. We call it the microwave era, but it's also not. The microwave era can also suck. We want everything right now.
Yeah.
We can get that. There's information we can get, but the flip side of that coin is, our ego and some things. We want right now. We don't learn patience, and everybody wants to throw that burrito in the microwave, right? Everybody
Yeah.
wants it right
Yeah.
now. But
Yeah.
sometimes it's better to grate the cheese. Sometimes it's better to make the tortillas and to cut the cilantro and to add those, just marinate the meat a little bit longer. And I promise you do all that. It's going to be much better, much better.
Yeah. You can't watch an hour-long recovery video and expect to understand addiction. You have to have had lived it and battling in recovery, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Going back to your business, because I want to make sure that I have some things understood. What is the format? Explain to me how people are interfacing with 21 Pathways. You basically have a room somewhere. You're setting up certain times of the week. What's going on?
So we set up at Bethany Church, Fresno, California,
Okay.
one of the greatest
Okay.
church in Fresno. They have been so gracious. They, also, by me working there, they've given me the keys to everything. Really, they've entrusted me. And I am a recovery minister. I'm more on the outreach side, and I take a lot of pride in the facilities, obviously. But my role now is outreach. My role is recovery minister, and what we do is we started off with in the student center room, and there was 12 of us that started, and now we have like over close to 110, 120, sometimes 140 people every Tuesday night, 6:30 to 7:30. And we've grown. Now we're online. We're on
Awesome.
YouTube and Facebook. And like I said, we go in there and we just translate scripture so it's a little bit easier. Just like I translated the Beatitudes. But we go through the stories and we just kind of go through, like I said, Exodus, and we go through the book. We just finished the book of Job. We'll be doing probably, I like Daniel. We might go through Daniel a little bit, but when we get to Matthew, Mark and John and Luke, and we really dive into, some of the different contexts, but we really just, all we're doing is teaching the Bible in a way for everyone to understand it. I need a coloring book. I need to be in like the little kids room when they're learning about Moses and Jesus, because that's the only way I'm going to understand it. And that's what we do. We do, we do videos in our meetings, and it's an hour of, I'll give a message, and I'll go over the book of Matthew for the first 15, 20 minutes, and then we'll have somebody give their testimony. And usually the people that give their testimony, they have a wonderful story. Fresno, I will say, believe it or not, I've been up north and I've down south in different conferences. And I will say that, and I'm really proud of this, Fresno has a phenomenal recovery community. We have great facilities here. There's Touch, there's TLC, there's so many great places, First Steps, even like, we have the Salvation Army, which are, we do a lot of work with them, Poverello House, Fresno Mission, there's Her Harbor Recovery, there's Lighthouse, there's CAP, there's so many, and we all Teen Challenge, and there is a connection amongst everyone, and there's so many great mentors and people that have been through it. I mean, we have people from LA and up north that come to the Central Valley to get sober, and then they just don't leave. They end up staying here because the community is so great. And it really is. It's a blessing. And it's been nothing but a huge part of my journey. You know, the people that we meet, I truly believe that community results in that agape love, you know, that unconditional sacrificial love. And what we do is we teach that the bridge to it is service. You know, you have to figure out a way to be of service of some kind, whether it's stacking chairs or having a coffee commitment or just giving somebody a hug, right? That's or just being an open ear. You know, you have to give it away to keep it. You know, the one thing that I've seen people probably like yourself and me and so many others is, you know, by showing other people their purpose, all it's really doing is helping us find ours. And, you know, this podcast, the platform at 21 Pathways, you know, everybody that's doing their part to help people in recovery. I mean, we live in a world that is just full of, you know, ego and sin and drugs and alcohol. It's gnarly, man. I mean, you look at these places out there in Arizona, you look at, you know, I mean, the 10 thing, like, dude, that's gnarly. You know, Southern California has their spots over in downtown, you know, Skid Row. And then you get like, you know, you start moving your way back east. And, you know, I see those videos those guys are posting of, you know, Kensington and you know, some of these places, these gnarly places where trank and fentanyl is just completely taking over the streets. It's nuts. And I see it firsthand when people are coming in and looking for treatment. I mean, that drug trank, that's no joke. That's no joke. I've seen a couple people now try to withdraw off that or kick that. That's, man, like, you know, it's scary out there. And the kids just keep getting younger and younger and younger. And then, I mean, kids now, it's not just vaping and whippets. Now they're like taking a Sharpie to foil and they're smoking they're getting high off the ink off of the foil. Yeah. Oh, dude, it's what kids are doing, letting the harming themselves. You know, we live in a dark place, and it's people like yourself and me and so many others that just we have to figure out a way to work with one another, bridge with one another, and help out and do our part. You know, we've been through it, and that's to me that's the service that I'm in right now. That you're in is just trying to figure out, drop those breadcrumbs off for other people to connect the dots to whether it's finding a sponsor or picking up a Bible or watching a you know, a podcast, you know, just educating themselves a little bit more about recovery, sobriety, and the beautiful amazingness behind all of it. I feel like your purpose, my purpose is.
Oh, for sure. Amen. Amen. How many days a week are you meeting?
We meet one day a week. We meet Tuesday, 6:30 to 7:30. Okay. We are on, like I said, YouTube. We're on all the social media, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, all of it. And we take a lot of pride in events. We'll throw like a softball tournament. We do all kinds of crazy stuff. We try to have as much fun as possible and just get more and more people involved and try to get these newcomers just, you know, a little bit of motivation, a little bit of inspiration to keep coming back one more day. Try to just give it another 24 hours. It's going to suck, but you can do it.
Absolutely. Wonderful. You know, we got to keep removing the shame and the guilt from the addiction, right? We got to keep, you know, just keep separating it, right? Just, you know, it's something that you're going to have to deal with for the rest of your life. It's a cross you're going to have to bear. But you know what? You've got a support network around you. There's a Simon and Cyrene that's right there with you, helping you carry it. Always. Absolutely. To the very end, right?
Absolutely.
And I know that, you know, I want to make sure that we are logical in our train of thought because we've got so many different directions we can go. But going back to this initial notion of, you know, recognizing the addiction, dealing with the addiction, you know, I think that we are our worst critics, number one, right? I think we're highly self-critical as addicts. We are aware of our problem. We just haven't figured out a way to basically kick it. And when that happens, right? We're continually beating ourselves, but at the same time, our animal brain, because this thing's taken over so bad, is constantly grabbing us back for self-preservation because we're afraid of what life is like without it. But just the success that you've had in what you've done, just the things that you're already starting to do, obviously, I mean, your purpose, man, is just glowing. And I think that sometimes the addicts deal with existential crises, right? In a lot of different ways. I think that they're typically, especially when we start intertwining mental health into it.
Oh,
You've got
absolutely. Yes.
regulations of emotions by, people feel and think deeper than what we would expect to be normal, and
Yeah.
they can't manage things. And so
100.
I believe that that's where, I was joke around and say, hey, thank God Jesus hung out with drunkards. I'm like, that's me,
Right? Like he hung out with all crowds were welcome. He hung out.
right?
Yeah, and I tell everyone this, I am a student of Christ, and I choose to be a student of Christ over Christianity. I choose to have a relationship with God over religion. And I truly believe, he's the greatest teacher. I mean, there's so many great teachers, don't get me wrong, but I have just found so much peace from learning from Christ, right? One of the things I just currently wrote about was about how the lessons of humility, how the lessons of humility has softened my heart. Oh, I live in Fresno. It's a big ag place, right? So, you know to plant a seed in some good soil rather than that hard pan. But the lessons of humility has softened my heart to allow me to plant the seeds from the greatest teacher of all time, and allow me to grow those seeds and grow that fruit. And I'm so very blessed in my journey. I'm so very blessed. That gift of that hotel room and going through it, what I went through, and I'll even throw in my wife's cancer. I'll throw in all of it, all of the trauma in my life, all the pain, all the suffering. But that moment in Bakersfield, that was the greatest gift, because it has just created this whole new path for me. And I've met some of the most amazing people in my life, people that I call family. Like that guy, Tony. I mean, we do so much work together. He's taken me through, I can't think of the book right now, but we do so much work together. We look at the context of, what Mark was saying in the gospel to what Matthew, to the steps, conversations that I had with my buddy Quentin. Just there's so many people in the walls of recovery that have had a significant part of my life, my journey. It's those are the relationships, and those are the gifts. We all know what's right and wrong. And if we can just figure out a way to constantly start following those breadcrumbs of truth and goodness, man, it just keeps getting better and better and better and better. And then, it's a bigger breadcrumb. And then that breadcrumb is, you meet this person from that breadcrumb. And it's an unbelievable gift. Sobriety is so beautiful, so beautiful. Yeah. Recovery is so beautiful. And the rooms of recovery, so beautiful. It really is. You meet some of the most amazing people. And yeah, you're going to have people you don't get along with. You're going to have people you disagree with. Right. But guess what? It's about setting aside what we think we know for a new experience. And they're the teacher, right? Yeah. I mean, they're the ones who are, the person I don't agree with. That's my teacher for the day. And that's the person I'm going to learn from, because I'm going to set aside what I think I know just for that, and to learn from that person. And if I can, and I would have never learned that, like being an atheist, thinking I knew everything, running a business, heroin all over the place. Like there's just no way. But I had to go through all of it to really understand what some of that stuff really, really means. And I'm so proud of it. I'm so grateful for it. So very grateful. I'm grateful for my journey.
Absolutely. Right. Absolutely. Thy will be done.
Thy will be done.
And sometimes we don't recognize it in the middle of it. And you just got to have the faith, keep the faith. And
yeah. One of the, go ahead. No, I was just saying, speaking of prayer, like, the set aside prayer and the third step prayer and the serenity prayer. The serenity prayer is so beautiful. I was working with a youngster today. I do some mentorship with, some high school kids. And first thing I kind of teach is that serenity prayer. Just understand what we have control of and what we don't have control of. And, just understanding the wisdom between the both of them, and just really breaking it down. It's such a beautiful prayer. I mean, that prayer saved my life. I mean, I remember every morning I would just say that prayer. I would say that prayer because I didn't know how to pray. I didn't know, like, I didn't know
Yeah.
how to just
Yeah.
surrender to God and let things go and just build that
Yeah.
relationship. And that's what it's all about. It's all about just building a relationship with something greater than yourself, and setting what we think we know, that ego, that sin, that pride, just setting it aside, that self-centeredness, and getting out of it and recognizing it and trying to stay out of it as long as we possibly can. But we're not perfect. There's so many times I drive behind somebody and they're like, God's funny. He knows, like, if I put a slow driver in front of Brian's going to, like, get frustrated and irritated, I swear, every day when I'm driving, there's always somebody driving like 2 miles an hour in front of me. And, like, I have to catch myself. All right. Just, let it go. Like, but really, like, let it go. Right. Like, just, yeah. So life is great. Life is so great.
Two things, I think it's very important to be curious in life, continue to just keep your curiosity up. And I think it's always good to do a self-check on remembering that you have to recognize that you don't know it all. And are you humble enough to recognize that?
Yes.
Because if you are, it opens you up for a whole bunch of wonderful goodness to come at you.
Right.
But you got to be open. You got to be non-judgmental. You got to be open. You got to be just willing to entertain ideas.
Yes.
Going back to something that you had said, there was a same theme regarding something you had said at two different points. The first one was you went there by yourself, not knowing anybody, just basically doing this, right? And I think that what's important is that know what you did. You showed up not by yourself, you showed up for yourself. And
yes, well said.
Absolutely. I know that me, especially in my addiction, that was my way of coping with everything else around, because I had to be all things to everyone.
Yeah.
And I wasn't. I was never able to be that way. And I was driving myself absolutely batty because I took myself out of the picture. And the first place is, again, I got to put the airplane mask on myself first. And I had for the longest time literally forgotten that. Yeah. And some people say, okay, well, but because again, it's like you had talked a little bit later, right? Just recognizing that there was a selfishness in you, right? Absolutely, in addiction, it's a weird, twisted selfishness, as much as we are trying to not be that person, right? And then in recovery, we're trying to find a new balance in self-care, not selfish. Yes. Right. So, and that's, setting up healthy boundaries, recognizing your triggers. It's, it's doing all the things that, now that you've basically, because there's a phase of maturity that takes place in recovery, because you absolutely have to mature to get through recovery. Right. If you've just stopped using, you're not maturing. If you're growing in your recovery, then then you've got this positive reality. You had said something else that was really striking to me, because I'd never thought about it until now. And that was, and I kind of summarized what you'd said, and I go, yeah, I remember times when I was accidentally sober. And because you were constantly using so much that some way, shape, and form, you inadvertently, maybe you're on a day trip with the family, and now it's 6, 7 o'clock at night, late in the day, and you've been out all day since the morning, and you're itching. And now the mood's changed. You start getting cranky, and you've recognized after the fact that you were a dick, and the reason is because you were accidentally sober, and you weren't coping. You weren't coping, and I recognize that in so many different environments. I'm just like, oh my God, that's again amends to make, right?
Yeah, and it's going to continue to happen. You're going to continue to have these moments, and absolutely, man, absolutely.
This whole functioning in addiction, something else just about nobody knowing, right? And that's what makes addiction so damn tricky. Yeah. Because you can be functional. I had somebody that was in rehab with, that was 70 years old, had sold like 7 businesses in his life, was uber wealthy, had known probably for the last 15 years, because somebody had mentioned it to him at work, that you're probably a functioning alcoholic, paid no mind to it. And basically, again, uber functional. And then all of a sudden, what happened? He started hiding bottles.
I see.
And as soon as that trajectory happened, and again, this is a guy that had been managing it for decades.
Yeah.
And you just sit there and you go, this thing is so elusive. It's so cunning. Right. You think you got it under control.
Mental obsession, right? The physical allergy, Yes,
right?
absolutely, man. Absolutely.
Yeah. And then yet, when we get into our sobriety, we're now fighting for this new balance, because when we're in our addiction, time is just a different perception. When we're completely sober and lucid and we're in the present, it scares the shit out of us.
Yeah. Right.
It's because you're just like, okay, how do I live life now? What
How
do
do
I do
I
with this time?
Absolutely. When I got sober, like that was how do I do things sober? I've never done things sober. I've always popped a pill. I always took a painkiller. I was always high. I was always and then having
Yeah.
to learn how to do, in the book of Moses, in the book of Exodus, when they're at Mount Sinai, they kept getting bit by the snakes. And they were out there, they were starving. At one point they're like, it was better to be a slave than it is out here. And people were dying. There was no food. They were struggling. They were going through it. And they're like, Moses, tell your God, like, pray to him, tell him to, fix the situation.
Yeah.
So Moses goes to God, and God says, get that staff, build a big bronze head, shove it on that staff, slam it in the ground, and you tell your peoples, if they want to survive, to look that snake dead in the eye, right? Look that snake dead in the eye. So, and that's how they'll survive. And guess what? That's what they did. And, I look at that as like, we go through sobriety and we are like, we're going through it. I mean, those snakes are crossing our path left and right. Those fears, those doubts. And the only way that we're going to be able to get through it is to face those fears dead on, face them, face those doubts dead on, and look them in the eye and get through it. And, chapter 21 of the book of Numbers, that's kind of like, that's a big part of 21 Pathways. And because it's not easy, man, like, we do a class where we help people, find out their credit score and teach a little bit of finance, teach a little bit of like credit and how to build credit and how to get good credit and just how to get out of debt. But first thing you got to do is you got to pick up the phone, you got to make a phone call, and there's little things that we have to do that when we're sober, in order to continue to do it, we have to face it. And I'll tell you what, when you do face it, you get, okay, wow, I did it. Okay. And then you do the next one. Okay. You know what? I can do this. And you know what? Now I can climb another step. And now I can climb another step. And you know what? Now, you know what? I can even carry a backpack. I can hold your water for you because I know you're struggling. So I'll carry that backpack for you. And you know what? I can give this person a hand up and I can give her a boost. And it's just, you start to pick up these breadcrumbs that people start dropping out for you. And before you know it, now you can start dropping them out for other people. And watching other people pick up those breadcrumbs and watching other people connect the dots and go through sobriety and start facing those fears and facing those doubts. What a gift, right? I literally am the richest person in the world. And I don't have any money, but I really am.
Right.
I'm rich. I'm so rich. And I'm
Yeah.
so, and I wouldn't have any of this if it wasn't for him putting me what he wanted to put me through. There was a reason he put you through what you went through. There's a reason why I went through it. I guarantee if you didn't go through what you went through, you wouldn't have this podcast. Am I right? I mean, had you not gone through what you went through and your struggles and everything that's led up to this moment right there, right now, where you and I get to be present and not have to worry about tomorrow or worry about what happened yesterday.
Exactly.
I love Eckhart Tolle. I love that power of now. There's so many. One of my favorite things right now is just learning and reading other people's, perspective on things. And I even like the haters out there that are, telling me I'm doing it wrong. And, I have no business being in recovery. And I end up, it's so funny. I probably know a little bit more about the big book than they do. And just to let them go on and on and on. And
it's irony.
You know what I'm saying? And then you got the people out there that there's so many people out there on social media that just hate on, like I said, people that are trying to just improve their life. And if it's, the rooms of AA, or if it's the rooms of, if that's where they got, or a pickleball court, I mean, whatever you've got to do to surround yourself with the right people. And that's what it's about. And I think, like, oh, you're doing it wrong. And there's so much hate, and one of the favorite Beatitudes is blessed are those who are hated on, for they will thrive. That's how we translate it. The blessed are those who are persecuted and say evil things about you. We just say, blessed are those who are hated on, for they will thrive. So it's you're going to have the haters, you're going to have the people, but that's church would call that the enemy, right? And you're going to have that. You're going to have those fears and doubts come across, and you're going to, 21 Pathways, the group of us that got together, there's been some arguments, and there's been some like, well, this is, we should do it this way or do it that way. And we know at the end of the day, we're going to persevere through it. We're going to encourage one another, and we know that if God's at the center, it's going to continue to work. And I think that's to me is like that's the secret. You have to figure out a way to recognize that ego, that self-centeredness, that pride, and you have to figure out a way to push it aside and lean on something greater than yourself. Because when we lean on our ego, I mean, as well as I do, where we're going with that. I'll be under the bridge cooking squirrels, like, dude.
Well, and like you're saying, right? I mean, that's one of the things in recovery really taught me, kind of going back to the things we do in addiction with, people pleasing, right?
Yeah, right.
And so when we get into recovery, we're like, no, I've got a healthy boundary up now. Right? I don't need to try to have you be in my tribe. You either are or you aren't. So be it. I've got my people. You got yours. If we're not on the same level, it is what it is. I'm not gonna lose sleep over it, because I know my tribe will continue to grow, and I've already witnessed that in recovery. Right.
Absolutely. And like we said, the common ground is we all want the same thing. And I think we just forget, like, we all want the common thing. We want us to live.
Right.
I've seen enough people overdose and die. I've witnessed, I've seen a lot of people relapse. I've seen a lot of people disappear. I've seen it sucks. And I would much rather know, like, okay, you know what, like, you and I don't have to be friends, but you know what, like, let's be on the same page in terms of letting that person over there know that, like, what we're doing is a good thing at the end of the day. And at the end of the day, we just want you to be healthy, and we want you to make it another day. That's really it. I mean, that's, watching people overdose, that's no joke.
No, and that's the thing is it's scary and sad, obviously, from the perspective of being in recovery and having to witness that firsthand, because you recognize, that the trauma, the wake of it, because it's like a bomb going off, right? I mean, when you witness those things, it's a traumatic bomb that's going off and it's affecting everybody around. You also remember what it's like to kind of be on that side, right, with those same struggles. And especially, I think the biggest part about it is that you recognize the pain in it. Yeah. You recognize what that pain feels like because you remember what it felt like.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that you that's the toughest thing to transmit to someone who is in active suffering. It's like, hey, I know what this feels like. I've got zero judgment on you. I have zero judgment. And I know what this feels like. And I know that this sucks. And I know that it's probably going to get worse before it gets better, trying to come off of whatever it is you're dealing with. But trust me, I got you. This is going to work. You got to have some faith. You got to be patient with yourself. This is going to be a whole new reality, but it's going to be a beautiful reality. And,
it really is. It really is a beautiful reality.
Yeah. Okay, so because I'm chomping at the bit with this one, so
go ahead,
you're going off. We're doing scripture talk here, so okay. So I got one for you. You ready?
Yeah, please.
So one of the things that was so profound to me is in New Testament. I think we're Romans or Ephesians, but Paul says, "I do not do what I want. For if I did what I wanted, I would not do the things that I do. Yeah. Thus I concur that the law is good." But then he says, "If I was justified by the law, then Christ died for nothing." And then that's when you sit there and you go, hey, that means, everyone, that we're all good. We're all good.
We're all worthy.
We're all good. So let's just stop, and
yeah. Isn't that beautiful? And guess what? Like, I'm willing to bet your journey and my journey, we wouldn't be talking about it had you not gone through it. Had you not, had I not gone through it, I wouldn't know it was Saul before Paul. Had I not gone through it, I would not know that this guy wrote some amazing letters, man. He wrote some. Paul was a G, and man, he died.
And on the front end, he was the worst.
Right?
Right.
chopping
Right.
off their heads. He was killing them.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
he had that revelation, went blind. And man, dude, fruit of the Spirit, Galatians, Ephesians, Romans, one of, I got Romans tatted on my neck. Dude, Romans, I'll tell you what, verses 7 and 8 for me, very rarely will someone die for a righteous person, though for a good person, someone might possibly dare to die. And this is how God demonstrates his love through us. While we were sinners, Christ died for us. It's understanding that we're all worthy. We're all worthy. Like,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
all deserve.
Again, yeah.
We all deserve to live our life as if all our prayers have been answered. Every single one of us.
Yeah.
We all deserve the best life. And that's, and when you finally can understand and grasp, like that's what it's all about. That's.
You know what he did? You know what he did in a nutshell? I mean, the simplest thing that he did was he basically said, look, he goes, I'm going to show you who you are now. And I put this all back a long time ago, and I'm still telling you how you are now. And I tell you what, I bet you there's nobody in this world that can tell you the same thing that I just told you.
Right?
The end.
The end.
So yeah, I mean, it's
well said.
When the words start jumping off the page and start feeling like they're getting punched by Tyson because they're smacking you so hard and things just start clicking, you're just like, oh my goodness. And you're just like, oh my goodness.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We, right. In our, every one of our meetings, we read the temptation of Christ out of Matthew. Jesus was tempted by the devil for those 40 days while he was fasting. And, a lot of that stuff comes from that. A lot of it comes from, just, knowing the word, trusting the word, knowing the story, trusting the story. God has a plan. You just gotta, you just have to trust it. There's a path. We have to trust the path, and we got to walk that path correctly. When Jesus was tempted for those 40 nights and the same three tests, when Moses and them were in Mount Sinai, the same test, and he's quoting scripture from Deuteronomy, and because he knew the word and he trusted the word. Man does not live on bread alone, but every word that comes from the mouth of God. And the devil tested him 3 times, and it was successful. And I love scripture. I love reading it. I love reading other people's application of it. Hearing what you said in the Romans, like just listening to you speak and hearing other people speak about it with so much passion, just like you just now did, like it fires me up. And It truly, truly does. Like it's there's something about it that it's because scripture's hard to read. I mean, I had the hardest time reading scripture when I first got into it, the hardest time. And I still do. I truly do, but I don't give up on it. And I keep trying to, that's how I get better and better. And for me, it's the challenge of trying to understand it a little bit better and a little bit more, and to be able to recognize every scenario, every scene that was already written, and applying that scripture to it. And I take a lot of honor and a lot of pride in it. And, that's what, back to 21 Pathways, we're a discipleship, and it's about just discipling and teaching, which ultimately is a sponsor-responsee. That's really what a sponsor-sponsee is. It's a mentorship, it's a discipleship, it's teaching of the steps. Well, same thing with the disciples, it's the teachings. And, we do a lot of parallels from the big book to the Bible. And we try to help people just really kind of connect, so you're saying the Lord's Prayer came out of the book of Matthew? Like, yeah, it's something we read, that prayer that we read every day after every AA meeting or CAHAF, whatever meeting that is. Yeah. That comes from the book of Matthew. And, I love watching people just go, really? Like, oh, okay. And when you can spark that interest in other people, and when you can create that little crack of light. And one of my best friends, she sent me scripture from Proverbs yesterday, and I mean, this was the last person on the planet, the last person on the planet who I ever thought would send me scripture. And she has a sponsor now, and now she just got through, I think, her 4th step, and she's starting to connect the dots, and and watching other people connect the dots, especially at such a young age. These young kids, I watch them come into recovery, and I would have said, first off, there's no way I could have done it, and I give them so much props for being able to come in there and give it a chance. And the ones that really stick it out and start working a program and start really trying to figure out learning about the ego and learning about their self-centeredness and learning about pride and your character defects and, just understanding the vocabulary and wanting to learn more. So many of them come in there like, I just can't see myself being sober the rest of my life. Well, neither can I. Like, there's no way, but if it's something you truly, truly want, and if you've suffered and you've gone through that experience to where you don't, you recognize bad, how bad, that sin, that alcohol, that, heroin, how it tricks you into thinking it knows what's best for you when really it's killing you. If you can recognize that, hallelujah, like, dude, right on. Like, it's
massive.
It's huge. And some do and some don't. And, it's just, that's part of the world that you and I live in, is watching people come and go, watching people pass away, watching that one person who you would have never thought would relapse. That one person, and come to find out that person, it's got hidden bottles underneath the seat, it's just, wow, recovery's wild.
I've seen it happen, right? But for the most part, your hope it's just a slip, and people get right back on it and recognize, again, you can't undo growth, right? So you hope that the growth is set in, and it's kind of like they recognize in the, if they could become actively addicted again, right? At least they go, I get it now, right? Oh shoot, and so they start. So I've witnessed that where people start freaking out because, like, I get it now, like it finally clicked, and it was actually a slip that really did it for them. They had a good amount of time.
They had to go through it, and that's and guess what? That's their story. And same thing. And I'm so proud of the ones that do, and can okay, put my pride away, admit what I did, and get back in. And go up and get that, that 24-hour chip. I mean, those are the ones I got so much love for. Because I haven't experienced that, and I hope I never do. But I can only imagine how hard. I mean, I struggle with past failures. I struggle with past failures. Right? Like, I struggle with it, and it's hard for me to let go. And sometimes I go down those rabbit holes. Well, I should have done this, or I should have done that. And to see people. Like I said, I'm so proud of the ones that relapse and get back out there and just, they're embarrassed. They don't want to walk up in front of everyone, and, it's just, but they do it, and they do it, and they fall on the sword, and that's where that meekness grows. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. And it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful.
Well, we know what happens, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And you know what? It's such a great, that was their hotel room experience, was having to, get up in front of everyone and go grab that chip. And, that was, for someone that was their hotel moment. That was their moment. They're like, that clicked for them. Thank God. And now they're going to take it a little bit more serious, because they know next time there might not even be one.
Well, because I know from my experiences and from just the people that have dealt with a relapse is that the first thing that addiction does to you, it's going to say to you, look, you fucked up. What's the point of even trying again now?
Yeah.
Right. And just keep doing what you're doing. Just keep it on the under. You got control of it this time. It's okay. It's okay.
Nobody has to know.
Yeah. Nobody's got to know.
It's only I mean, it's only right. I mean, how great did you sleep? How great did you sleep? Don't worry about it. And then guess what? You can have another one.
Yeah.
And before you know, they're breaking another one.
Yeah. I one of the ways that I try to maintain my balance in regards to maintaining a healthy distance from those that you do see potentially going into a relapse, who have stepped away, is that, again, going back to scripture, Christ is walking with the disciple, and the disciple says to him, why haven't you shown this one what you've shown me, right? And Christ's response, he goes, what is that to you if I should have him wait until I come? He goes, you follow me. And so that's what we do, right? We sit there and we say our prayers, we go, I'm sorry. And we keep trucking on those we can. And God will take care of the balance, right? I mean, he that's our faith.
He will. God is so good. God is so good.
So what's fascinating, right, is that a lot of my faith was established before I recognized my addiction. And so, and just recognizing some of the piece, there was a piece I was missing, of course, right? I think that didn't really, it was, and I think one of the most profound things for me was that true surrender, right? It's that true surrender, right? I'm not going to get sober for my wife. I'm not going to get sober for my kids, right? It's I got to get sober for me, number one, but number two, I have no idea how I'm going to do this. So I need help. Please help me. Someone please help me.
Yeah.
Whatever I need to
Someone
do,
please
right?
help me. Someone just
yeah,
show me something.
yeah.
Well said.
So one of the things that really always drives my faith is Isaiah, prophet Isaiah, right?
Yeah. Good
Because
me.
he talks about being on the mountain, right?
Uh-huh.
And there's this feast, right? It's a feast of rich foods and choice wines. And then he reiterates it. He goes, of rich choice meats and the finest choice wines. He goes, on this mountain, I will remove the veil that veils all people. I will destroy death forever. And you sit there and you go, that sounds like a heck of a place that I want to be. I want to be at that party, right? Because, he reiterated, right? He reiterated that, though this is a good thing, trust me, right? And, and then in the New Testament, right, you see it, right? You see in the modesty of trying to deflect that it was happening to somebody else, knowing full well that it happened to Paul, but just talking about his seventh heaven, right? And I saw things, ineffable things. And all I know is that we're good. We're good.
Yes.
So have the faith and keep on trucking, right? But in the surrender, right? I really believe that this world would be hell if it was just one of us on this planet, right? I mean, and we are learning to love each other. That's what the point of this life is, right?
That's the whole point, right? That's the purpose,
right?
Because had it not be, we'd all be a bunch of robots and everything would be perfect, and there would be no way for us to figure out or how to lean on something greater than ourselves,
right? And so, right, we know that there's this purification that's taking place, right? There's this process, there's this whittling away of who we are, right? And it's an attempt, and it's truly a process of us getting closer to God, right? And on that note, right, the other thing that I thought of was that, unless we were in truly a perfect world that was in perfect love, us never dying from this place would be hell. Because we have to remember that we are in a process of we're in and we're out, right? Yeah. We're in and we're out, and there's a reason. Have faith in that reason that he's doing this, because God is omnipotent. God is all loving, all knowing. He would do it another way if he felt like it was the best for us. But he knows, because of free will, he knows that this is the best way. So you have to rest in that, right?
Absolutely.
I want to talk a little bit about the family and dealing with addiction and everything else, because it's a very, very important thing in my mind too, because I know that in sobriety, I've had some changes in relationships. Of course, if you do have a big, community that was obviously using with you, right, and they continue to use when you're in sobriety, those things will be as modified as they should be, right? You're going to have those people out of your life, unfortunately, right? But then if you don't have that type of network, my network, for example, for the most part, friends and stuff, everybody was cool, right? I never got asked, why did you stop drinking? What's wrong? I never get asked any of that stuff, right? Because everybody was in the know. That's in my circle basically knew I went to rehab. They knew I had a problem. I was St. Francis of Assisi, basically stripping myself in the town square, that the same way that you basically did your table talk, man. You're just like, it's time that I confess my sins, right? And because I wanted to be held accountable too, right? And because I still was in the process of beginning to trust myself. But I've also had some really interesting changes in relationships with people that were so used to the person that I was. Maybe they didn't physically see me in active addiction, right? Or they've known me so long this way that they just don't know any other version of me. That now that I am in sobriety and conversations have changed now, there's, again, just everything has just changed, that there's a shell-shocking effect, because they feel like they've lost some of the identity of who the person is that they're talking to.
Absolutely.
So that's been interesting. Of course, one of the big things, right, in the addiction world, there's the people that are normies versus the people that are addicts, right? There's this lack of understanding. If you're in recovery or you're going through the process of it, you try to get family to help start understanding it as best as they can. There's a lot of great resources, again, right? One thing that I've recommended, everybody that I can possibly recommend this to, is Dr. Nicole Labor. She has a keynote speech. It's about an hour long on YouTube. She breaks down what addiction is just to help families understand what's going on biologically, chemically, that's got them stuck in this loop that they can't get themselves out of, right?
Yeah.
And so again, it's just, you put some science on it, right? You start removing the I am an addict to an I have an addiction disorder that I've got to deal with, and just start, again, I think putting up that healthy boundary does a very important thing with making it something that's now outside of me and I can manage it, at least, control it. It's a bull, it's there, it's constantly trying to charge at me, but I've got it at bay. And it's difficult, right? Because us in recovery are trying to find this new balance.
Yeah.
Trying to not be selfish, trying to also be protective of our recovery because it's so important. And so I think that the thing that remedies all of that is communication, right?
Yes.
And of course, life gets in the way. But we do the best. We do the best that we can. Yeah, I think therapy is obviously a blessing. If you can,
Yes.
obviously the system that you're doing, I'm a big advocate. If the couples need to get into therapy just to understand.
I think therapy. I promote counseling. Mental health is no joke, and we're all messed up, right? I mean, I remember, and I tell people this all the time. I mock it a little bit, but my therapist told me my problem was I had multiple problems, and it's just right. It's so beautiful. Like we all have, but it's understanding it. It's being able to surrender to it. It's being able to to talk about it in a healthy way, to communicate it with your family. My conversations with my wife and my kids, they're not the best, but we can identify it, and then we can figure out a way we've been through it enough to know like a healthier approach, and a way to make things, a little bit easier for everyone to understand, to bring things to the table. Like, okay, well, it's we're all affected. And like you said before, like the three pillars of Al-Anon, the one thing that really stands out is we have no control. We have no control of anything. I don't have any control of, I have literally no control of anything. It's all out of my control. And I have to figure out a way to let it go, surrender to it, and find peace in it. Because if I don't, then, I'm punching holes in walls, and I'm arguing, and I'm raising my voice, and now me and my kids are arguing back and forth with one another, and then my wife's jumping out, and everybody. I got three women. I got two daughters. I get jumped, and I got my dog, and that's about it. And even my dog will take their side. So it's.
I agree with you.
You know what I'm saying? Like there's got to be a healthy approach, and you got to have boundaries, and the boundaries is so important, and I know you mentioned it earlier, not wanting to discipline everyone. So you got to learn how to say no. You have to learn how to say, you know what, I can't do that. Unfortunately, I would love to do it, or sometimes less is best. Like I don't know how to answer that right now, but I will answer it. Give me a day or two. Give me 24 hours, and I'll come back with the right answer, instead of just throwing up, something that we don't know. I've learned. Again, and I wouldn't have even known all this, and I wouldn't know to go look up Dr. Nicole Labor and her, had I not gotten sober. One of
the things that's fascinating about your story is just talking about this wanting to go and be the janitor at your church. I had a similar moment in my life where things were at a point where everything that I had attained had felt inherently empty. And I recognize that there's something greater. There's got to be something greater taking place here, because if this is what I got to do, then I feel like it was in vain. And so, and of course, I think a lot of it is of course, it's generational. It's the bring up. It was I'm a Gen X kid, right? So it was the way I was brought up. It's the attainment of things, right? It's the trying to make it in the world, right? A little dash of keeping up with the Joneses, right? And then if you get even some of that, you just find that the desire to have it is just gone, and that whole thing that you were striving for doesn't mean anything. So you're like, okay, well, shit, now what? I either become uber obsessed about it and try to obtain more until I find that high that I'm looking for, or I recognize that I'm never going to find it, and I got to basically now shift to a purpose-driven life. Right?
Yes.
Right. And so
Yes.
that's what happened, dude. I mean, you're just like, no, I mean, my need for this education, this knowledge, this to give back and to do everything was driving you so hard. You're like, yeah, I'll go be a janitor for church. Heck yeah, that sounds like an awesome opportunity to get full on osmosis of the word, and
100%, man. 100%.
Yeah.
I used to think that I remember I used to think that I was the black cloud followed me wherever I went. And then it came. Then when my wife got cancer, I was like, I am the black cloud. I am that bad luck. And then I got sober and I realized I was just chasing that black cloud. That's all it was. And I was trying to chase something that wasn't even there. And like I said, it tricked me, thinking it tricked me. When I took that job as a janitor, like it's like confession leads to healing. And I work now with a staff of just some amazing people. And there's times when I get frustrated and I might disagree with somebody, but at the same time, like I'm blessed. I really am. And I have to realize I have to take a step back sometimes, get out of my pride, get out of my ego, and recognize like how good I have things. I'm healthy. I have great kids. I have a great wife. I have great friends. I get to be on here with you tonight. I get to write about it as soon as we get off. Life is good. It's just led to like now I've been, promoted and now I'm like a recovery minister. I've been, now I do a lot more outreach and now I'm doing a lot more different things than, scrubbing the toilets and mopping the floors. I'm building a ministry and we're discipling and I'm learning more about discipleship. I'm learning more about the word. I'm learning more about prayer and the power of prayer and putting things into action. I would have never thought 3 years ago when we do our interview, we always start ours off with like, what were you, like you said, you've been sober for 18 months. Like, so how we're going to start with is, what were you doing 19 months ago? Right? Like how bad was it 19 months ago? Like, where were you at?
You want to start there? Woo!
That's where we start. We start right there.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, that's how we start every one of our testimonies. Okay, your sobriety was 3 years. January 31st, 2022. What were you doing in December 21?
Yeah.
It's incredible to realize our low points and to recognize. Now we can recognize it, right? Because to me, it's about, you don't learn that first step that, you don't learn that you were powerless until you take a step back and you can recognize that you're powerless. I was powerless to heroin. You were powerless to alcohol. I'm powerless to control. I'm powerless to everything, and to be able to recognize it and recognize what created that chaos.
Right.
That's the learning point. And then, you get to step 2 and you start to trust like people around you, start to build those relationships and watch that transformation happen. And that's how we come to be. And then before you know it, we're turning our will over and then we're creating that. I mean, it just keeps, like I said, there's people out there that can, people that tell me how stupid I am for reading the Bible and believing in the steps and going through the steps and believing in the Bible and wanting to educate myself because I just want the same thing as they do. And it's so crazy. Like I see these comments and it blows me away, and it really does. It's just so. But then again, at the same time, they become my teacher. I would have never been able to understood that moment of them being, of the haters being my teachers. Again, had I not recognized that I was chasing the cloud, right? That I was, understanding the power of surrender, understanding that every moment is an opportunity to let go.
Yeah.
It would have never even come about had I not been so low in my life, hated myself so much, been so like drenched in guilt and pain and that guilt. My gosh, like that's just, it's the worst. And had I not been buried in that, and man, that was just God saying, all right, don't give up. Don't give up.
Yeah.
I know you want to commit suicide, but just, hey, all you got to do is pick up this breadcrumb I'm dropping off for you. That's all you got to do is just pick it up. You got to just believe in something greater than yourself. You have to believe in that goodness and that things are things are good in life, and there is a good side to everybody. And we have to believe that there is, believe in the best in situations. One thing that I had a long talk with my pastor today about was just believing in the best. I struggled with it, like, because I've watched so many times in the past, either people let me down, people, guess what? Those were the people that were like doing drugs and people I was hanging around with. I mean,
and we're self-fulfilling. Yeah.
and that's
Or
how
we're
we build these.
self-fulfilling.
Yeah, that's how we build those patterns of how we think, because we were brought up in a situation or a culture or a neighbor, whatever it may be. We learn, like, okay, you know what, I've been screwed over so many times, like, how can I believe in the best? And you have to change your way. It's all about changing your way of thinking on everything. That's why it took me up until this third year of recovery to really, really, goddamn set aside prayer, set aside everything we think we know for a new experience. And like, it's so crazy how many times during the day now I say it, because I have to remember, my pride. I find myself judging others just like, they're judging me, and I have to figure out a way, like, there's got to be the best in somebody, and there's instead of that evil and planting that seed in my head, that bad thing, chasing that cloud, I have to remember that there is a goodness, and that people are good, and that people do love, and that people do forgive. And it's only because of God's grace and God's mercy that I'm here today. And it's only God's mercy and grace that you're here today. And there is good in this world. We just have to plug into it, and we have to believe in it a little bit more. That's all.
Absolutely. And I think that my recommendation is that if you can get there sooner than later, awesome, because you're gonna save a lot of time
and a lot of money. Yeah.
Right.
And a lot of money.
You talk about gratitude, and it's something that I definitely I was the complete opposite of it in addiction, straight up. And I had things that sure people from the outside looking in could sit there and go, oh, he's justified for that. Absolutely. There were definitely some things that have happened in my life that, like, yeah, I mean, people would sit there and go, well, he's justified for being, not grateful because, shit went bad for him and he did nothing to, to cause it and everything else. But the interesting thing about gratitude, because I do my best to make sure I've practiced it every day and just carry it in my heart. But when we're younger, right, and I think this is where we kind of get slipped up. When we're younger and we get something for, let's say, we're in our 20s and we get ourselves a brand new car, right? Well, hey, you don't need to be going and showing it off to everybody. You don't need to be, bragging about it. You don't need to be, right. And so I think that that in turn implants as I can't be grateful for something. And that's the furthest from the truth.
Yes.
Because again, your gratitude is not outward, it's inward, and it's to him. Right. Sure, arrogance, pompousness, all that stuff is an outward reflection of, look at what I got, smug, I got this and you don't. Yeah, sure. That's a different thing. That's not gratitude. So, but,
absolutely. No, gratitude is a huge part. I mean, there's so much to be grateful for.
Be specific, right?
Yes.
Every day.
Yes.
Try to put 3 things down, be specific, and make them different every day.
Make them different every day. Everyone, I like I said, I work with a lot of people, and it's so I always start off with gratitude lists, just so we can get to know one another. I have them send me send me a list of things you're grateful for every morning. Send me the praying emoji. Let me know that you prayed first thing in the morning, and then send me 3 to 5 things that you're grateful for. And I love that, because you get to learn. You learn. You're building a relationship. Oh, this person's got brothers and sisters. Oh, this person, they're a dog lover, and and then you start to build that gratitude for one another. Then you start to realize, and then it's great. I have gratitude for this gratitude list, and they start to say things like, then it gets a little deeper. Like, I'm grateful for forgiveness. I'm grateful for learning, forgiveness over resentment. You learn so many. When you start to really appreciate all the small things, right? All the little itty bitty things, man, it makes the big things that much better. Absolutely.
You were kind of talking about is that especially with like the kids, right? Life is messy, right? And it's messy at every decade and the capacity in which we can handle it all, right? I mean, to sit there and to disregard a 12-year-old is life's not messy for them. That's discounting the fact that, well, they're operating at a different wavelength and they've got a lot on their plate. And so for them, it could be, right? But, letting my kids see the transparency in that, right? And even if that means, right, that you've seen some of my failings, you've seen the same things, you've witnessed some of the things that I need to make amends for, because I want them to be able to feel comfortable in doing that themselves as they're adults, right? I want them to recognize that it's okay, to admit your faults. It's okay, to recognize that you need help because you're struggling with something, even when, society says, well, that's just simply a bad thing. You shouldn't be doing that, you know? Um, and I think that because recovery is messy, right?
Absolutely.
So I think the transparency with your family and all of it, I think it goes a long way. What do you think are the 3 biggest mistakes that would lead somebody to relapse?
The 3 biggest mistakes, thinking, letting that, that, I would say the mental obsession, that physical allergy, them thinking they know it's, like, I can just do a half of Xanax. I can just do, half of Xanax isn't going to do anything. I could smoke a little bit of that fentanyl, just a little
I'm
bit.
less of an addict. I'm less of an
Yeah,
addict.
those are the
So
real.
I'm no
those
longer
are
an
the real
addict. Yeah.
addicts. Oh, those old timers. Oh, dude. Yeah,
Mm.
those are the real ones. I'm not, and
Right.
I would say that would be it. And I would also say, like, just obviously it's that lack of knowledge, and it's that lack of, it's not understanding, that not understanding the ego yet, not understanding that the ego is just so powerful. It, like I said, it's ego tricks us. And that's what ego does to those kids. It tricks them into thinking that it knows what's best for them, when really it's just about to kill them. And it's all it is. It's just one big trick, and they think they got it, and they'll listen to it, because that Lamborghini looks cool to go do it in, and you know what? If I do this, maybe she'll like me a little bit more, or he'll like me. What am I going to be, sober for the rest of my life? Man, I talk to kids about it all the time, because that's what they all say. That's, man. So what you're saying is, I can't, when my brother gets married, I can't even have a drink. And and the crazy thing is, sometimes these kids, like, I ask myself, there's this one kid I work with, and he's got like a week and a half of sobriety, and there's somebody that wants to get him into a detox, and he's not even an alcoholic. Like, he's just a kid who likes to drink once a week on Friday. Does that make him an alcoholic because he likes to drink once? It makes him stupid, because if he doesn't understand he's going to hurt someone or hurt himself, like, that's the problem. But he's not. It's not like he has that mental obsession or that physical allergy. He's young, and he just wants to hang out with his buddies and smoke a little weed and drink. And is he? If I can teach him that he's putting himself in harm, and he's going to put other people in harm. My daughter, she has a beer with her friends, and she is well aware that if she's had one or too many drinks, she's going to Uber home. But then again, this day and age, like, my daughter, a date night for her is playing video games against her friends and having a beer in our house, and just drinking, having a beer and playing video games. That's like a night going out nowadays. Like, and she'll be in her pajamas, she'll walk out and she'll grab a beer out of the fridge, or, and go in there, and she's just, you can hear her laughing, and she's just having so much fun. Like, who am I to tell her, oh, you're an alcoholic? Who am I? She's not. She makes great. She's getting her master's. And, like, she's just wanting to enjoy. She worked all day. She taught all day, and she studied all day, and now it's her chance to unwind and play some video games with her friends. Like, I'm going to let her do it, and I'm not going to stop her. And again, there's so many ways at the top of that mountain. There's so many ways, and it's our job. I feel like it's our job just to educate these young kids. Hey, okay, this is that, this is the difference. Okay, this is what's going to happen if you hurt someone else. Driving drunk and killing someone, and going to jail for the rest of your life, that's not the punishment. The punishment is that you have to live with killing someone else. The punishment is knowing that you killed someone else's son or daughter. The punishment is knowing that, you killed someone else's mom or dad. That's the punishment. And, having a talk with, just saying kind of like those things, or letting them meet somebody who spent 25 years in prison and the things that happen in prison. Like, come have a conversation with this person. Let me tell you what it's like to have a felony. Let me tell you what it's like to have a felony and like not being able to vote or own things, like it's the consequences. And I think it's understanding like the consequences of what we're doing. And that's just a life lesson, right? I mean, if I lie, there's a consequence. If I steal, there's a consequence. If I'm tempted and I do something stupid, there's a consequence. And we have to be accountable, like you were talking about earlier. It's all about being accountable and understanding what accountability is and being held accountable for our actions. It's and those are life skills.
Yeah, it's interesting because I remember like, coming home, like my wife and I would go out to dinner and I'd be sitting there like I'm already past my second old fashioned and I'm sitting there watching her like she's got still a half a glass of wine left.
Right.
We're done with dinner. I'm chomping at the bit to get to the liquor store and she's having a hard time finishing the one glass. And that's just the way some people are built, right? They never have the problem. And the biggest thing just becomes, it's like, okay, but with that mental obsession starts, if you find that you started upticking it, if you start, you're running into a slippery slope situation here. So, so be mindful of those things, right?
Be mindful of those things. Absolutely.
And the thing about it is, I always tell people, I'm like, the reality of it is that if addiction showed us what it was capable of at our first drink or our first use, there would be no addicts in the world. But that's why this is what it is, right? I mean,
that's why he created temptation. Oh man, I love the book of Job. Why this? Why that? Why? There's a reason for all of it. It was all God is good, dude. I go down these rabbit holes sometimes, like what and it's just there was a reason why there's temptation. There's a reason why, like we have choice, free will. There's a reason why if we make bad decision, there's a consequence. And it's all about like, like which way, what's the test of heart? Which way are you going to go? How are you going to face those demons? And, what are you going to do when that time comes, when you have to make that decision? When that test of heart comes, will you walk that walk? Will you be willing to follow the footsteps? Because you know what the right way is. Now, hey, guess what? You might get off track, but if you're going to ask me to hold you accountable, you better believe I'm going to grab you and throw you back in. And it's a great journey. It's a great life. And to have those challenges, we wouldn't be talking about it right now. We wouldn't be able to share our experiences. We wouldn't be able to tell about our spiritual journey because, because we persevered through it. Or we're still up to this point, we've persevered. I can't speak about tomorrow or 5 years from now, but up to this point, 3 years for me, 18 months for you. Up to this point, we've persevered, and that perseverance, man, that feels good because it wasn't a challenge, it wasn't a trial, it was an opportunity for me to persevere, for me to get through these tough times, and to just trust God, God at the center. God's got me. Okay, I'm going to pray. Even though things were bad with Job, he still went back and prayed. Even though he had everything taken away from him, he might have been angry, but he was still communicating, building that relationship with God. I love the book of Job. Chapter 28, verse 28, that poem in on chapter 28, so beautiful. I love it. If you ever get a chance, check it out. I make sure I read it at least once a week. But, verse 28, to fear the Lord is wisdom, to shun evil is understanding. That's what it is.
Yeah. You, in talking about the one that's going, you want me to be sober for the rest of my life? You telling me I can't have a drink ever again? Like what's, the first question really truly becomes, it's like, why do you feel like that's such a bad thing? Why do you feel like that's such a bad thing? Because if you're telling me that that's a bad thing and you can't understand it, it's telling me that there's something deeper going on there that may not even realize. And that's the reality, right? I mean, you gotta sit there, and so because you're at a precipice here, start digging into what that is. Start right now, right? Because that statement in and of itself tells me that there's something else going on.
Absolutely.
And because again, we know what addiction looks like because we've been in it.
Because there's, you have the wisdom. We don't have all the wisdom in the world, but we have, just listening and talking to you, I've learned so much, and just being able to hear your words. Likewise. And how you're able to articulate some of the experiences that you've been through. Wisdom, right? And again, back to, the discipleship of these young kids. Like, okay, great question. Are you willing to set aside everything you think you know about what you think you know, and just for a new experience on a conversation that you and I can have? And are you willing to listen? And the power of listening, right? Just being able to listen to someone else and gather that wisdom. Some of the best rooms I love in either AA or NA, are those ones that you hear some topics that are just gnarly, and these guys are able to expand on it. And you can tell they've gone outside of the big book, and you can tell they've taken the Bible and they've compared it to what other people, maybe keynote speakers have spoken about, maybe the book of Job and their perspective versus another person's perspective. And then they've gathered the wisdom and taken what they wanted from both of those keynote speakers. And to me, like, okay, oh, wow. Okay. And then that's the one where I want to just sit back and listen you had someone on your podcast, I think, gosh, she said something. She said
just
something.
Smack you right across the face, right? You're like, perfectly said, right? Yeah, I get it.
Right? And you're just like, and you don't have a pen to write it down. Yeah. You just got to be like, okay, I got to go back to that one, rewind it, watch it again, and that's the beauty of it. And talking to these kids and getting, just getting them to listen. But if they're willing to engage in that conversation, and if they're even willing to have that question, okay, now we can engage in the conversation.
I agree with you. And I'm a big proponent of exactly what you're saying. And that's part of the reason why I'm doing this, is because I'm like, but here's a different perspective. Yes. Have you thought about it this way? Because again, it can be daunting, right? I got to go to this meeting, even if it's anonymous. I got to go to this meeting, and it's still awkward, and I got to listen, and I got to start kind of understanding step one. It's like, well, I don't even want to take that first step. Well, if you don't want to take that first step, how are you going to get the information, understand what's going on with you? And that's why I put it out there. I'm like, well, let's think about it this way. Well, have you ever thought about it this way? Because I know that, like you're saying, something's going to click with someone. They'd be like, just like the Bible does for people, right? I mean, because again, you're talking about real. I mean, this is existential stuff you're talking about, right? I mean, it's deeper than how your day was. It's so much deeper than understanding. I mean, it's just, and that's it. We're digging deep into our soul and understanding addiction.
And we're just talking about the topics of it being an opportunity, looking at the opportunity and changing our perspective in that way. I mean, that's just a sliver of the existentialism that we can get into. Like, there's a whole other realm that I'm willing to listen to other people talk about, to take my growth to another level, to continue to grow my tree and grow vines, and to grow that, because the seed that you've grown for the last 18 months, the seed I've grown for the last 3 years, I'm proud of it, because there's been some storms that have come in, and I've had to figure out a way how to train it up, so tied up against some bamboo, and maybe there was way too much water. I had to pump some water out, and it's gone through a major snowstorm, and you got to figure out a way to weather the storm. And you got to. It's going to get chaotic, and you have to figure out a way to, okay, what am I going to do when it hits the fan? What am I going to do, and how am I going to get through it? And
uncharted territory.
Right, exactly. And when I'm in that foreign territory, and when I'm in that uncomfortable situation, how do I make myself comfortable? How do I really learn to surrender? A great technique that I try to teach these young kids is, just go jump in a cold bath. Go jump in a swimming pool at 5 a.m., at 6 a.m. when it's, freezing. And because at some point you got to surrender to that water. At some point you got to be like, you got to let go, because at first you're going to be breathing all crazy. And then, but at some point, if you let go, you're able to breathe. And, for me to physically understand how to let go, that was the only way I was able to learn when, people said let go. It's like, jump out of an airplane. Unless you want to jump out of an airplane, that parachute's either going to open or it's not.
Yeah.
And, there's ways there's physical ways to understand it. And, like I said, it's just one of those ways for me. That was the only way I could learn. To physically learn how to let go.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, it's this whole new. So how does this new version of me now deal with this internal problem I have now? All of a sudden, it's shown up maybe via a trigger. How does this new version of me deal with this external stimulus? Maybe I'm having a disagreement with someone. How does all these things, right? It's so uncharted, and so it's scary. But I'm a firm believer that anybody and everybody that's recognized a deep, deep, deep sin that they're having a very hard time shaking, I encourage them that if you become aware of it and you can't shake it, to keep digging deeper into it, because there is fruit at the end of that, and you will come to get. So there's so much fruit in it.
Absolutely. Just you have to figure out a way
Yeah.
to persevere.
Yeah.
You have to figure out a way to get through those rough times. Because that's where
you can't surrender to the addiction. You can't surrender to the addiction. You have to surrender to the sanity. I mean, you're getting your life back. You
got to surrender to that pain and suffering of detox. You're gonna have to suffer through going to those meetings and sitting in there and listen to people talk about stuff that you have no idea what they're talking about. You just know that, like, at that moment, that's the place you should be. You have to surrender to, having a roommate that's driving you crazy, even though you're in your first 90 days of sobriety, and somebody doesn't want to, or somebody took your toilet paper or whatever it is. And you got to learn how to surrender to that stuff.
Yeah. Hey, you got your first Friday night and nobody's home and you ain't got shit to do. What are you going to do?
What are you going to do? Right? What are you going to do? Man, that's the one,
Dude,
what are you going to do? And it's real.
It's real.
So real.
Yeah, no, we get it. Been there, done that. Sound familiar?
Yeah, it's, man.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Dude, so when I went into rehab, I did 30 days, and when I felt the change. I was there. I was going on a lot of mental health breakthroughs that I had, a lot of trauma resolution that I had, a lot of confession that I had. It was just liberating on so many levels, right? And I was like, I coined out, right? And I'm just like, yeah. I get home and I'm like, no. It's like, help. I'm like, I need to get in my IOP like now. Get me in front of people again. I need to get in front of people. This is all scary. This is all too familiar. I know what I used to do here. So I need to change my game.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely, man.
Yeah.
That's 100 right there for sure.
Yeah. And that was the one thing too that, I felt kind of tricked, but then I understood the reason behind the trickery, because, it was probably, I think, a week into it. And, of course, I've already learned so much in just the week, right? With doing obviously some classes and things like that, right? And understanding what's going on. And I'm like, so wait a second, you're telling me this isn't like a 30-day one and done? I'm like, you're talking about all this other shit I got to deal with afterwards you want me to do now? And I'm like, you didn't tell me that on the front end, but but I understand that people probably wouldn't have come in if you did. Right. I'm like, because I'm the rookie in detox. So this is my first time. I'm a first timer. So I didn't know any of this, but at the reality of it is, I'm like, well, but yeah, I was like, yeah, I absolutely need it. By the time 30 days ago, I'm like, this is raw. This is all new uncharted territory. And in a sense, right, it's a death of an old person, right? It's a death of an old way. And that chain breaks free and life becomes so much simpler, and it's scary because you're in the present constantly and it feels like the clock is ticking so stinking slow and you don't know what to do at this time and you're scrambling for hobbies, and what you end up doing is you just play this diversion tactic that's basically your addiction rearing itself in another way. And you're like, okay, well, I'm not feeling any better here. And yeah, it's like I said, recovery's messy, man.
It
And
is.
it's,
It is. If we surrender to it, right? All we got to do
yeah,
is if we surrender to it, it can be clean. It
yeah,
can be clean, and
yeah,
we can make use of it when we can use it as a tool to learn from it, and we
yeah,
can, we can understand it as, okay, it's a challenge and we got to figure out a way to get through it. Well, how are we going to get through it? Again, like community, and we do it with one another. Like, man, I'll tell you what, like, if I have a recovery question, you better believe, bro, I'm gonna, you've been added to the list. Okay. Like, you better believe, like, you're a smart dude. You're very articulate. You have strong communication skills, and I can tell you
appreciate
have a
you.
lot of wisdom behind you. Like, you better believe, I might shoot you a text. Hey, what do you think about this idea? What do you think about that idea? And it'd
For
be
sure,
great
for
to
sure.
hear what you have to say.
Yeah,
And that's what I
absolutely.
do. I surround myself with good people. I surround myself with people that, are wanting the same thing that I want. Wanting to climb that mountain, and willing to help others, genuinely, sincerely wanting to help others, because there's, I've been around those that say they'll reach out
Yeah,
their hand, but they ain't reaching out their hand.
yeah,
And, they're more worried about just, getting to the top faster than anyone else. But like, why, it's not, what are you racing for? Why
right.
are you, it's not,
Yeah,
it's, like you said, it can be messy, but then, okay, now we can learn from that mess. And okay,
yeah,
well, you know what, maybe I put up a boundary across that person. I don't even, you know I know he's not going to reach out his hand, so why would I even ask? Why don't I ask the person that will reach out his hand? Because, because
yeah,
one person who won't, there's about 10 others that will, and I want to be around those 10 others. And,
right.
I want to be around their love. I want to be around their forgiveness. I want to be around their kindness, their gentleness. I want some of that, their fruit. I want that fruit from their spirit. And man, we're just, I'm so blessed, man. We're so
Yeah,
blessed.
yeah,
We
right.
really are. It's amazing. It's amazing how lucky we are.
Yeah, no, because we know what the other outcomes are. And one of the things that was so striking for me when I first came into rehab, and it was something that I know that, again, just really ignorance, call it not wanting to be associated with this so-called group known as addicts.
Yeah. Right.
And so, even if I contemplated that I had a problem, I sure as shit didn't have a problem like people that were going to rehab did. Right. And so you constantly play mental chess with yourself, trying to justify all the reasons why you're not going to go in. Right. That's your number one answer on why you need to go in.
And that's, yeah,
Because,
100.
it's got you figured out. It's got you figured out.
It tricks you.
And, yeah. And so, but more importantly, okay, don't think for 1 second that you're going to be going into an environment where people are going to be mumbling to themselves. Everybody's mumbling to themselves in a fetal position in a corner, throwing shit and breaking shit. Okay, it might happen on occasion, an individual here and there in their process of detoxing. But the end of the day, I've met people that from an intelligence level that will run laps around just about anybody. I've
Sure.
met, like I said, I've met a man who sold businesses 7 times over, multimillionaire.
Yeah.
I've heard of Google executives getting help. I personally know someone who was in Forbes magazine for their brilliance
Yeah.
that are dealing with addiction. So it knows no race, color, creed, size, shape, nothing. It don't give a shit about
It
what you look
don't.
like.
It don't.
So
It's out there to attack and bite and
yeah,
take as many people down and build an army. Yeah, man. Yeah, that those soldiers, man, they're out there. They're doing
yep,
their burpees, and
yep,
they're getting strong. And what are we doing? Are we willing to get as strong? Like, are we willing to, like we said, continue to educate
yeah,
ourselves, continue to go to meetings,
yeah,
continue to surround ourselves around good people,
yeah,
continue to learn?
yeah,
Because if we do, then we can acknowledge that they're out there. That disease is out there to get us, and if we can acknowledge it, then we can put up that armor. That's for sure.
right. Yeah, it's sobriety is something that at the end of the day, if you think about this as something that you're going to study for, and then you're going to take a test and you're going to pass the test and you're done, then that's not sobriety. That's not recovery. Recovery is you buying that piece of property, building that house, living in that house, and taking care of that house to the end of your days. That's sobriety. So that's recovery. That's recovery. So, my man, we've been doing this for 2+ hours. I feel like we've hit a great end point.
I think it's great, man.
But of course, I think that, the fact that we've got each other on text now, we're definitely gonna be probably shooting things back and forth to each other.
Absolutely, man. This was, man, I'm glad I got to know you. I can't wait to get to know you a little bit more. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Sure.
This is, I can't wait to share it with everyone I know. And, what you're doing is so cool. It really is. It's so cool.
Thanks, brother.
I've only heard 2 of the guests, but man, I'll tell you what, like I said, it's being able to pick up on that 1 or 2 things and that have been slapped you in the face that, man, like makes me want to go back and write down that exactly what they said, because I don't have that one written down, and it sure be nice to write it down. So I appreciate you, and I appreciate everything that you're doing for not only the recovery community, but for my growth too. So thank you.
Yeah, no, Brian, I appreciate you, and definitely Fresno is not far, and I actually do have family in town. So
okay, oh really? Awesome.
So so even better.
So if you get a chance, check us out. On YouTube, Facebook. I mean, we save all of our. We had someone up there last night. He spoke on. He had 37 years of sobriety in NA, and more importantly, 37 years of a relationship with Christ. So. His name is Ray Haney, amazing musician. Check him out. And then the guy I think we had before that was my guy Lewis from Touchstone. He his stories. I mean, from running trap houses to owning sober houses. You know what I mean?
No, I mean, I get it. You think you've heard it all? Come to one of our meetings.
Yeah, right. So it's great. And like I said, we share a little bit of a word and a little bit of a testimony. So it sounds like obviously you're very familiar, kind of like on the same page I am. And for you and I to get up there and you'd be, I would do the one with you. That'd be for sure. And we'd go up there and we'd do a somewhat of a message. I'd have you join me with the message. And after that, we'd get into your testimony. And it's, it's really cool. It's not an AA meeting. It's not Celebrate Recovery. I'm
good.
One of the pastors of the church, he was describing it today to someone. He's like, it's just messy. It's just messy, but it works. And I was like, you know what? That's it. It's messy, but it works. So, yeah, please, it would be an honor. Be an honor.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Sure. We will figure something out, my man.
Absolutely.
Brian, thank you, sir. You have a great night. Blessings to you and your family. Okay.
Blessings to you too, man. Thank you so much.
Take care. Bye-bye.